going to be demonstrating the marking capabilities of our LasePen F3 marking system. So right here you can see I have a few simple shapes drawn out. There's this line, square, circle, hexagon, as well as this simple text and this QR code. Now these are both filled in already, and we'll talk about that in a moment, but for now let's go ahead and set some parameters for these shapes that I've drawn. Now, you want to do that and just make sure that they have it set properly for the material you're marking it on. And to do that, you come over here to the right, and there's these parameters here, as well as this massive list of pens. Now, all a pen is an isolated folder, essentially, that holds on to all of these parameters in this box. Right now, you can see it's all set to default. I'm going to click on this one, this blue pen, and uncheck this box right here, and that'll allow me to modify these parameters myself. So the loop right here is just how many times it's going to pass over the shape that it's going to apply to. I'm just going to keep that at 1. We only need it to go over the shape once for this demonstration. The speed right now, for our purposes, is a little bit slow, so I'm going to speed that up. And this is just the speed of the laser itself, how quickly it travels in millimeters per second as it marks. The power is fine. That's set to 50% of total power, and that means that only 50% of the machine's power that it's capable of is going to be being used for this pen. And the frequency I'm actually also going to increase. It's set fairly low right now, and that might make our marking a little bit heavy or a little bit hot, and we don't necessarily want that. And this is in kilohertz, so this is about 40,000 hertz. It's just easier if it's done in kilohertz. And it also affects these boxes down here, not the frequency, but the pen itself. Every pen holds on to all of these. So we're not going to talk about this. This just really affects the timing of the marking itself, so you can fine-tune it in the future, but we'll go more in depth later in another video. In the meantime, though, I'm just going to also select this pen, and as you can see, they're both different. I'm going to deselect use default parameters, and this one, the speed is fine. I'm going to leave it at that slow speed, but I'm going to decrease the power a little bit and also raise the frequency like I did for the last one. And you can also type into each of these boxes if you want to not worry about clicking a bunch. So now I have these two parameters set, and they are different, as you can see here, but they're not being applied to any of these shapes just yet. So you can select individual shapes, and to set a parameter, all you got to do is right-click it and do Apply to Pick Object. So now you can see the shape is orange. That means that this pen right here, pen number 2, which is the one that I modified that is orange, is applied to that shape. You can also do it for multiple objects as well. So I'm going to click and drag and select all of these and do the same thing, Apply to Pick Object. And now they're all orange. So every single one of these shapes will mark with the parameters that I have set for this orange pen, pen number 2. And I'm also going to come down here, and for these ones though, I'm going to select pen number 1, which is this blue one. So apply. So now each of these objects is set to pen 1, but as you can see, they're still black, and that's because the hatching or the fill for these shapes is still set to the default pen, which all of your shapes will set to when you immediately open up EasyCAD. And the way that you fix that is you click on the object that has the hatching, and you can only do this one at a time because the hatching could be different for each object, and click this hatch menu button on the far left, or this large hatch menu button up here at the top. Either or, both of them work. And that's going to open up this hatch menu. We're going to go more in depth in this in a future video as well, but for now, all you have to worry about here is the pen number. As you can see, it's set to 0, which is the default pen. So I'm just going to go ahead and click this menu and select pen 1, the blue pen that we've already modified, and hit OK. And that applies it to the object. As you can see now, this object is blue. And I'm going to do the same thing here with the QR code. Select that. Good. Now all of our objects are selected. These are all set to the orange pen, pen number 2, and these are both set to pen 1, the blue pen. And now we just got to make sure that it's actually going to mark where we want it to mark. So I'm going to click on this shape right here, and then come over here to our marking surface and press F1 or this button on the screen right here. You can do F1 on the keyboard, F1 right here, either one works, and that's going to show you the red light pointer. Now, even though I have the squiggly line shape that I drew selected, you just see a box. And that's because when you have it set to this default setting, it takes the two most distant coordinate points on that shape and then draws a box with them. So your entire shape will fit within that box. But if you want to see the shape itself specifically, you can come down here and click Show Contour. And what that's going to do is it's going to actually show us the specific lines of this shape. So I'm going to go ahead and do red F1. And now if you look, you can see where each of those lines actually are going to be. And you can do it for multiple shapes as well. I'm going to just select the circle and this hexagon right here. And then we'll do the red mark for that as well. And now you can see a circle and a hexagon. And the more shapes that you add, the harder it's going to be to use the Show Contour tool because the laser has to jump between each shape. And I'll just demonstrate that now. If I select all of these shapes, including the text and the QR code, on the surface it's kind of hard to see where it's all going to be because it has to jump from each shape before it marks the next one. So I'm actually going to deselect Show Contour for the purposes of this test, and then I'll do the red F1 again, and that gives us a box where all of our markings are going to be contained within. So I'm going to remove this. This is just so you can see it easily. And I'm actually going to be marking on this black material here. So we have it selected and it's already lined up. I'm going to go ahead and pull down the safety hood. And it's required that you pull this down. The machine actually won't mark unless it's pulled down. And even though this is laser safety glass, it is still imperative that you wear your safety protection over your eyes. So let's go ahead and mark that, which we can actually do in multiple ways as well. On screen, let me go ahead and stop the red laser. You can either mark it with this button, mark or F2, and that's because you can also use F2 on your keyboard. And there's also on our LasePen F3 machines this control panel right here, and you can start or stop the marking with these two buttons here. And alternatively, there's also a foot pedal accessory that comes with it, and that's what we're going to be using for the purposes of this test. So let's go ahead and make sure that's nice and secure. It is, and let's initiate the marking. Let's take a look at the results. Beautiful. So here we have it, our finished marking. Very crisp, very clean. The stuff that's on here is just left over from the coating of this, but that could easily become removed, and it will come off if it's set high enough. We just did some basic settings with our tools here for the purposes of this test. And as you can see on the pen list, these are still set to, or listed as, rather, default, even though they are not the default pen. The default pen is this one with these parameters, but these are not default anymore. And the way that we can actually do that is we can save them to a library that comes with the program, and we can do that by pressing this button down here, select parameter from library. And this list right here is just because I've done multiple tests and I've worked on this machine for some time, so these are all parameters that I have figured out or gotten from other sources that I've then saved into the program. So let's go ahead and save this pen 1 that we have selected as test 1. And now if we scroll down, we actually have test 1 saved in our library here. Now before we do anything with that, I'm also going to select pen number 2 that we used, and I'm going to save this one as test 2. And those are both added to the list as well. Now, you can access these later, and this carries over throughout your instances of EasyCAD on your same machine. So if I close EasyCAD and then reopen it, I'll still have access to all of these saved parameters. And you can apply a new parameter by clicking on a pen that isn't being used currently, like this one. If this is checked, which it usually is by default, you need to uncheck that first, and then you can come down here to select parameter from library, and then you pick the one you want. So I'm going to select test 1 for this one. And now we saved test 1 from this pen. It still says default, but that's just because we haven't changed it. Its name hasn't changed yet because we haven't selected it from the library. It is exactly the same as test 1, has all the same parameters, and that gives us access to this, so we can then apply this pen to any of our shapes that we want. Because it is the same as the blue pen, actually, what I would want to do is set it to this one, since these are the ones that those match with. But yeah, that's pretty much it for this test. All we're doing is demonstrating this. We've demonstrated how to mark, how to save parameters, how to modify parameters, and what they do, as well as accessing those parameters for future use.